I think it's really important to take the long view. So many of my, again, mistakes as a parent were because I was too short sighted. I was so angry about bedtime tonight that I lost sight of the relationship I was going to have with my kid when they were 20 years old. And the real question about school and everything else is, who is this kid going to be when they are, let's say, about 25 years old? Right now they're 5, we're 10 or 15. But the real issue is, what are they going to be like when they're about 25 and they're starting to find their own way? Are they going to feel good about themselves? Are they going to be able to have healthy, intimate relationships with other people? Are they going to still be talking to their parents? Are they going to be on good terms with their parents, right? Are they going to acquire useful skills and abilities? Are they going to trust their own judgment? Are they going to have good judgment? Are they going to be a moral person for other people? That's what we really are working toward. And the rest of it is just details. And sometimes we need to lighten up about the grade this kid gets in school, or this particular issue about how we do dinner in our home. We need to lighten up about those things for the sake of these greater prizes down the road.
Welcome to Empowered Kids TV, where we introduce you to the people and ideas to help you take action and create the family of your dreams. Today, our guest is a psychologist and New York Times best-selling author. He's been invited to speak at NASA, Oxford, Stanford, Harvard, and meditation centers all across the globe. His books are available in 28 languages, and they include Resilient, Hardwiring Happiness, Buddha's Brain, Just One Thing, and Mother's Nature, a book that I think every mom should have. His work has been featured across the globe on BBC, CBS, NPR, and many other media outlets. What I love about our guest is his practical nature and his desire to break down academic insights into actionable steps we can take to develop our brains and our mental skills so that we can foster greater joy, resilience, and inner peace. So please help me to welcome a dad of 2 whose passion has inspired millions to a more fulfilling life, Dr. Rick Hanson. Dr. Hanson, welcome to Empowered Kids TV.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here, Nicole.
In one of your books, I think it might have been the Buddha's Brain, you say that what flows through your mind sculpts your brain.
Yes.
I think it's really beautiful. So can we start there by having a definition for what the mind is and how it's different to the brain?
Sure. Well, at a basic level, we are all having experiences. You are seeing me, I am seeing you. We are having thoughts, we are having feelings. Those experiences are certainly our mind, right? And our experiences are not physical. You cannot touch them. But then also, we have a body, we have a brain. So, in effect, the way neuroscientists think about this is that the nervous system processes information, much like a computer processes information. The hardware is distinct from the software. So, in that sense, they're distinct. The broad definition of mind is all the information represented by a nervous system, some fraction of which is the basis of our conscious experiences. Where it gets really interesting is when you realize that all mental activity, all of our thoughts, all of our desires, our hopes and our sorrows, all of that requires underlying neural activity. They co-occur, right? They co-occur. And because mental activity enlists neural activity to represent it, the mind has a causal force of its own. The mind matters in its own right. It doesn't just reduce to the meat. And this means that since repeated patterns of mental activity involve repeated patterns of neural activity, repeated patterns of neural activity leave lasting physical traces behind as durable changes of neural structure and function. This means that we have the power, every one of us has the power, to use our minds to change our brains, to change our minds for the better, to help ourselves and everyone else on the planet.
Oh, that's beautiful. That brings me to really nicely into the notion of suffering. Since we
Mm,
have a choice of how we use our brain and our minds
yeah.
to try to foster greater joy, let's talk about what's at the real root of suffering.
Well, it's very deep. So I'm really appreciate you starting there because in part, some of what I might talk about could be misunderstood as just positive thinking, and it's not that at all. We must begin with suffering. Uh, I think there are two kinds of suffering. There is inevitable, inescapable suffering, the physical discomfort of a brick falling on your foot or illness. Then there's inherent emotional suffering when you care about people who are being mistreated and it wounds your heart. Or someone is mean to you. Of course, you're going to react to that. That's the first kind. But then there's the second kind of suffering that we add to inevitable, inescapable suffering of life. We add our reactions to what's happening. And also, often things are basically fine, but we get all messed up in our head about it, all driven or neurotic or anti, blah. I speak from some personal experience here, right? This is the second kind, which is arguably the bulk of our suffering. And on the one hand, because it's what we create ourselves, because of our habits, our reactions. Understandably, I'm a longtime therapist. We acquire tendencies in our childhood. Maybe we've been traumatized. We bring that to bear. But it's poignant that we add it. And it also is hopeful because it means that if we are the cause of it, we can be the cause of its end. And so there's some major aspects of the suffering we create ourselves. Maybe we'll talk about. I'll just say a particular quick thing, which is one of the things that can help us suffer less is to grow psychological resources inside ourselves, like grit or gratitude or compassion or self-worth. Also, obviously, if we can improve the world, we will suffer less. Many
Mm.
people suffer unnecessarily because of poverty, racism, injustice of all kinds, sexism, every kind of stuff. And so it's important both to take action out in the world, as well as action in our physical bodies to have good food, have good water, and so forth, and also inside our mind. I focus on the mind. I'm a psychologist, and also because I think the mind is full of opportunity, and you take the benefits wherever you go, no matter what setting you're in. But meanwhile, yes, let's do what we can to help the world become a better place for everybody.
So you know what I love about that? I think, and particularly what I love about your work, while we might strive to improve the world or the environment that we live in, I think there are limitations to that, right?
Yeah,
You can't control how the person in the room is going to act or respond.
that's right.
You can't control the events that happen to you in life.
Yeah.
And I think where you have the greatest control is in the skill set that you develop within your mind, which is why I really love your work. Like, so just before we started this interview,
So beautifully said. You are completely right and beautifully said.
we talked a little bit before we started the interview about your own interview with Professor Stephen Progress. And what I really took away from that was
Mhm.
that resilience was about looking at the response, the physiological response we had to stress that really moved us away from our equilibrium, but
Okay.
then finding those tools to regain it. Did I get that?
Yes.
Yes. High five.
High five. Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about that because I think what I first want us to discuss is the physiological response that we have to stress, because a lot of us,
Mm.
we without an understanding of what's happening within our brains and within our bodies, it's
Yeah.
easy to put the way we feel onto external circumstances. If you
Mm.
would behave differently, I would feel better. So
Yeah.
let's talk a bit about what's happening within us.
Well, let's see. This is great. So, first, the good news is that our equilibrium, which is a fancy way of saying our home base, all right? That feeling of coming home, right? You're a little kid, you crawl into your mommy's lap, that's home base. You get home, you're an adult, long day of work, people are crazy. Close the front door,
Ah,
put the kettle on, cup of tea, home base. All right. Our natural home base, psychologically, is well-being. When we, as human animals, like other complex animals, feel that their needs are met enough. You're safe enough, you're satisfied enough, and you're connected enough. It'd be nice to have more, but there's an enoughness to it. We calm down, we conserve our resources, we repair and we refuel ourselves. That's our home base, and in that home base, the body is calm, and there's a sense of well-being, and the mind is colored with a general sense of peacefulness, contentment, and love. That's good news. That's our deep nature. On the other hand, to survive and to cope, we are able to leave that home base. We're disturbed from it for ideally for brief adaptive periods of coping. There's a line that all episodes of stress in the wild end quickly, one way or another. And then, however it ends, equilibrium is restored. Okay, so that's the framework. And that's really good news. It means we just need to come home. We just need to reduce our disturbances to settle into who we naturally really are. Okay, what Dr. Porges has pointed out, and other people like him, is that the body is very involved in these states of disturbance based on stress, in which we're jostled out of our resting state. And the problem is, unlike episodes of stress in the wild and ending quickly, humans are exposed to chronic stress, chronic sense of distraction, disturbance, drivenness, multitasking, pressure, isolation, mistreatment, emotional upset, rumination, blah, 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 blah. So what Dr. Porges, to summarize, points out is that, in effect, we can intervene. The body-mind connection gives us two places where we can make things better. We can intervene in the mind. We can deliberately think about things that help us be calmer and feel more connected. Like if another person mistreats us, we can do things inside our mind like remind ourselves that we're a good person, bring up the feeling of allies inside ourselves who love us and care about us, remind ourselves that that other person is a jerk and it's not about me. We can do those things inside our mind. Also, in our body, though, we can help our bodies directly. We can take some big breaths. We can deliberately put ourselves in situations that feel comforting and soothing, like putting water on our face, or eating a little bit of something that tastes good, or looking out a window and seeing something beautiful, calming ourselves down. So that's fantastic, isn't it? That we can help ourselves in both kinds of ways.
It's so beautiful because when you were talking about all the stressors, it took me back to the original point about talking about the mind and the brain. And it
Yeah,
felt like all of these were just compounding where we were developing a brain that was more
yeah,
attuned to stress
yeah,
because we're so exposed to stress. And sometimes it's hard to mentally shift out of that stressful position. But
yeah,
now what you're saying is that if you can't get there with your mind, like if you can't think yourself into a peaceful, happy place, you
right.
can use your body to help you get there.
Yeah, yeah. And I'll tell you a really neat thing I've been doing lately. It's a three breath meditation. Now, the reason for it, it relates to my latest book with a cover that I really love this cover because I'm a mountain climbing guy. I'm a rock climber, and I just love the idea of going up to the top and, all that good stuff. So there's science in the book, and people can check it out and all the rest of that. But here, let's do it together for fun. And people watching can do this. Three breaths, three breaths. Okay, ready?
Yep.
And it might take a little more than three breaths to do it because I'll explain it a little bit. And think of it as like an experiment inside yourself. You're a scientist inside your own mind doing an experiment. Okay, here we go. First breath, breathing while feeling your chest as a whole. Okay. In the second breath, breathing while feeling caring. Maybe aware of the area around your heart, maybe with a hand on your heart. Just keeping it simple, the feeling of being with people you like or appreciate or even love. Breathing while feeling caring. Good. And then in the third breath, breathing while feeling cared about. This could be a little more challenging, keeping it simple. What's it like to be with people who appreciate you, like you, maybe love you? They're friendly toward you. Breathing while feeling cared about. Okay. Now we could take longer. I can see in your face already. I can feel it in my own self. Woof. Just that, less than half a minute. And neurologically, there's, because we understand now more and more about the body, we can deliberately create practices like that which I just created there to that are based on our understanding of the body. For example, really briefly, when you pay attention to your body sensations, that immediately dials down, turns down the volume on the voice inside the head, right? The voice in the back of the head, which is the major source of rumination and stress,
Mm.
right? Just paying attention to body sensations. Second, internal sensations of the chest, right? When you tune into your internal sensations rather than external sensations, you use a part of the brain called the insula. And when you use the insula through tuning into your internal sensations, that acts like a circuit breaker in another part of the brain that's the basis for the default mode network, which is a fancy way of talking about, I call it the ruminator. The part of the brain that, obsessing about the future, the past, rehashing conversations. Why, oh, why does no one love me? Why, oh, why are they jerks? Da 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 da. The ruminator. So as soon as you go internal to the body sensations, boom, the ruminator gets quiet. Also, when you tune into your anything as a whole, your chest as a whole, or if you like, the room as a whole, anything as a whole, what that does is it deactivates parts of the brain in the midline of the cortex that are caught up in mental time travel, thinking about the future and thinking about the past, and caught up in the sense of me, myself, and I, a strong sense of selfing, which is useful sometimes, but a lot of the time creates a lot of unnecessary stress and suffering. So right there, when you go into the sense of your chest as a whole, that activates networks on the right side of your brain, calms down these networks, which brings you into the present moment with less of a burdensome sense of self-preoccupation. Right there. Those, those are neural circuits. There's research that supports what I just said. That's just the first breath. And then in the second and third breath, when you tap into feeling caring, two good things happen. One involving oxytocin. So when you start feeling more caring or cared about, there's more oxytocin activity inside your brain, which calms down anxiety through its activity both in the prefrontal cortex and the ways in which the amygdala, the alarm bell of the brain, and there are two of them, one on either side, the alarm bell of the brain has receptors for oxytocin that are inhibitory. They're like the brakes on a bicycle or a car. Those activity at those receptor sites in the amygdala, they're like little docking stations where container vessels with oxytocin molecules come in, right? And when those receptors are active, ooh, it calms down the alarm bell. Great. Also, through Steve Porges' work, the vagus nerve complex has two major branches. One goes down, it's the old one. One goes up, it's the new one. The new one is involved in relationship experiences. The old one really calms the internal organs of the body. This means that since these two branches are connected, activity in one ripples into the other. So by focusing on heartfelt experiences of caring flowing in and caring flowing out, we activate the more recent second branch of the vagus nerve complex, and then activity in it ripples on down into the original branch, which calms us, slows the heart rate, gives us a sense of ease and coming together in ourselves. So I gave you like 5 or 6 separate neural hardware circuitry that's involved in that half a minute practice of just 3 breaths.
You know what amazed about it? So I started our interview really hyped because I was so excited for our
Yeah,
conversation. And the first breath, I could feel my body relax. And I associated that with just taking a deep breath.
yeah,
But there was something different when we moved into the caring and like my mind went to, and not just like who I cared about, I felt that difference. But feeling
yeah.
cared for was up a notch. Feeling cared for, I felt the same sort of safety that I would feel being wrapped in my mom's arms or on my dad's shoulder. That kind of I'm at peace and I'm okay. And
Yeah.
that and for me that was such a very quick but poignant way to see the interaction between the brain and the body when they come together just to help
Yeah.
calm that entire nervous system. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And the nice thing about practice is, of course, just for other people, we try to get something going in our minds, or we try to have something useful happen there, like receiving a good experience into ourselves, and then we see the result, right? And sometimes it doesn't work, but it doesn't mean you give up. It's like the first time you try to ride a bicycle. Me, I fell over a lot, but yeah, stick with it, and you finally get used to it. And then it becomes increasingly natural in much the same way with mental practices of various kinds. We make deliberate effort in the beginning, but increasingly it becomes automatic.
Let's talk a bit about some additional mental practices because I think if we can
Hmm.
give families a little bit of a tool bag that they can go home with. I know you love the breath, but
Yeah,
let's talk about things that may come up for us that push us into a place where we probably feel frustration or anger.
sure. Oh, yeah.
Are there mental practices that we can use again to develop that sense of safety or that quick back to equilibrium?
You bet. So, and I want to say first thing, for some people, especially if they have a trauma history, focusing on the body or the breath could be scary and hard. So it's very important to always adapt any suggestion to what's good for you. Find what's good for you. All right. So let's walk through. Something happens and it's frustrating, it makes you angry, someone mistreated you, you're disappointed, something has happened. This is what I do, and it's like my first aid kit. First, notice you're upset. I use the word upset in a very broad sense. Notice that you're stressed, you're irritated, you're pissed off, something has happened. Notice it right there. And if you can, be mindful of it. Step back from it a little bit, be aware of it, uh, claim 1% of yourself that is a calm, centered, stable witness of what's happening, even if 99% of yourself is your blood is boiling,
Yeah.
smoke's coming out of your okay? But that right there, that's one. Be mindful of what you're feeling. Right there is like a circuit breaker inside your brain, and it gives you some sense of distance and space. Second, have compassion for yourself. A moment of feeling, ouch, this hurts, just like you would with a friend. You feel the pain, and there's a natural warmth for yourself. You're like, oh, let yourself have that. It doesn't mean wallowing in self-pity. It's usually just a few seconds, maybe a little more, but just some sense of benevolence toward yourself, warmth toward yourself. Third, get on your own side. That muscular sense of, wait a minute here, you know, and actually it may seem so obvious, like, well, everybody's on their own side. No, my experience is most people are for others. They're good, but they're not for themselves particularly. They're not an ally to themselves. And so this is the more muscular aspect where you're like, I don't, I want to figure this out. I want to make something better happen. I'm knocked down, but I'm gonna get up
Mm,
and I'm gonna figure stuff out, right? There's that primal sense of moxie,
yeah.
coping, grit. All right. And so far at this point, maybe 5 seconds have gone by, maybe 50 seconds, but it's pretty quick. And then make a plan. What are you going to do? Coping binds anxiety. Coping clears anger. If you feel helpless and outraged, you're screwed. Sorry about that term, but you're in trouble. You know what I mean? And maybe that's where we start. Initially, we're often shocked, right? What are we going to do? But make a plan. Now the plan may be there's nothing I could do about this. I just have to accept it. I can't change it. I have to look at what else is also true in my life, but I can't do anything. It's not worth it. I'm not going to succeed here. It's not safe. I'm outnumbered. This is not the time. Sometimes that's true. Other times you make a plan and you think to yourself, I'm going to learn more here. I'm going to study this a little bit because I might lose a battle, but I'm going to win this war. Make a plan. Or you might think to yourself, honestly, there's a Maya Angelou, a writer, she has a lovely saying, to paraphrase it, when people show you who they are the first time, believe them.
Mhm.
Maybe me, I'm a little slow. I like the first time they do it, I'm like,
Hi.
really? Really?
I'll give you
The
another
second,
chance.
the second time they do it, I'm like, I'm starting to smell a pattern here. The third time they do it, I'm like, whoa, guilty as charged. Three strikes, American baseball metaphor. You're out. You know what I mean? Okay. So, and then you think to yourself, maybe that's your plan. Maybe you realize, there's no cheese down that tunnel. That dog is not going to hunt. Don't send a duck to Eagle School. That guy is never going to love you properly, let's say, or that teacher's never really going to understand. And then you think, okay, I'm going to put my effort over here. I cannot grow roses in a parking lot. I cannot grow corn in the desert. I need to find more fertile ground. Maybe that's your plan, but make a plan. So those things I think are really important. So the way I summarize this, the things that I've just said, deal with the bad. We must cope. We must be strong. We have to deal with things. And also, second, turn to the good. After you do those quick things that I've said, what else is also true? What is the good that is also true? The people who are actually good people, or the goodness in your own heart, or the things that are still working. Even if the bus is late or something bad has happened, meanwhile, the sun is shining, flowers are blooming, coffee tastes good. Your mind is still working. You're still breathing. Ain't dead yet. There's hope. you know. And then third, after, deal with the bad, turn to the good, take in the good. Slow it down to learn the good, to cultivate the good inside yourself, to grow the good inside yourself for your own sake. And also because as you grow muscles inside, you're more able to help other people. To me, that summarizes a lot.
You know what I love about that, Rick? I think by the time you get to make a plan, because you've taken, even though it could be seconds, to
Yep.
recognize, to give compassion, to turn the compassion in, and then kind of look for the good in there. By the time you get to that plan, you're in a different mental state to
That's
begin.
correct. Yeah. And with
And
practice, it gets faster and faster and faster.
exactly,
And
exactly.
and the bigger the challenge, the more time it takes to move through the steps. But again, with practice, it gets faster and faster. Yeah.
And for my own life, what I've seen to be true for myself and even for my kids, you have access to different resources based on those states.
Yeah.
When I can see red and there's steam coming out of my ears, I don't have access in that moment to
Right.
my love and my compassion and
Yeah.
my playfulness. That's not the
Yeah.
time when you get playfulness from me,
That's
right?
right. It would be phony
It would
to
be
act.
phony, exactly.
Yeah.
But by the time I've gone through those stages and I get to making a plan, because I've taken the time to kind of recognize how I feel and turn the compassion inward,
Yep.
then have greater access to my creativity and my softness and a bit of more of my playfulness. And then it's
Yeah.
authentic rather than what it would have been like if I tried to be playful while angry.
Yeah, that's right. And I want to underline, so I said those four things, be mindful of what's happening, slow down to be mindful. Second, have compassion, recognize the suffering and have a warm-heartedness for it, a heartfeltness for it. And third, get on your own side. That kind of muscular stance for yourself. I want to emphasize that, especially for people, and I'm going to generalize here, it will not fit everyone, but especially for people who have had society put them under its thumb. And let's name examples: women, people of color, people who are come from different class backgrounds, right? Um, it's especially important when society has not been on your own side,
Yeah,
has not been on your side, to get on your own, to get on your side yourself. It's
yeah.
especially important to claim that for yourself. And so I want to really underline that. And in my experience, for every arrogant asshole who's like world dominator, macho alpha kind of character, yeah, there are some of those people who need to not be on their own side so much and get on the side of other people. But for a lot of people, this issue of getting on your own side, being for yourself, is actually really central. It's really fundamental to claim the right to be on your own side.
You know what I like about that? And I think you're absolutely right. When you look at the different groups that are not used to having people stand up for them.
Yeah.
But, and again, it's a generalization, but I've seen it a lot with mothers. Mothers will fight
Mothers,
to death
what a
for their
group.
kids.
Yeah.
I mean, like you come at our kids, and the lioness she just emerges, right, claws out, but not so much for ourselves.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so that's definitely, I can see that that's something that we have to practice and cultivate so that we can stand up for ourselves with the same sort of fervor as we would for our children.
Beautiful. So true. And for me as a man, I come, as a father, I totally endorse that. That's why my book, Mother Nurture, was really about that because, I partly because I'm a guy, I was just stunned by what women deal with and what mothers do. And I just thought, this is crazy. They need more support and respect, not just when they're pregnant,
Amen.
or for a few months after the baby is born, but for the whole 20 or 30 years afterward. It's so important because they deserve it morally, and also it's enlightened self-interest for everyone, including men and fathers and society in general, to support mothers because it's the best way to support the next generation. And it's also a very important way to have a healthy society. So, yeah,
we You talked about being able to shorten the distance from feeling the discomfort of whatever is brought on the
yeah,
plane,
yeah.
to when you're back to feeling a bit of safety and a bit of like I'm home in making your plan. I had an interesting debate with a friend today. We were talking about resilience. Shows you how geeky I am on what I'm debating about. But the debate was, is resilience simply the ability to keep going in the face of a challenge? Or is it more than that? And is it about how you keep going? Is it about the fact that you keep going, but you find the path back to that joy, that safety, as opposed to keep going and you're totally stressed out, but you're going anyway?
Oh, I appreciate you drawing that distinction. I mean, yes, to be able to survive the worst day of our life takes resilience, okay? But what about thriving every day of your life in the face of what is in the days of most people's lives? Challenges, mistreatment, obstructions, physical pain, health issues, deep worry about others. Um, these are challenges that we have to face. And resilience, indeed, is the psychological quality inside us, supported by physical factors in the body and also supported by external factors that help people be more resilient. But that said, resilience is an individual attribute. It's the attribute of individuals. It's a personal attribute. And so our resilience, which is built inside us from multiple strengths of different kinds that come together, like strengths we've named already: mindfulness, compassion, self compassion, grit, getting on your own side, the capacity to make a plan, the capacity to think clearly, even when you're really, really mad or really scared or really sad or really hurt, right? That's what helps us become resilient. And as we are resilient, we are able to preserve a core of well being. Around the edges, we could feel frazzled, rattled, pressured, but in the core of our being, in our inner temple, we protect a sanctuary of well being, right? Because if we're able to survive and cope while feeling nothing but terrible inside, that's not true resilience. That's not true resilience. True resilience protects that innermost core of well being, in part because that core of well being fosters resilience, right? If you feel miserable inside and all you are is angry and miserable, that will undermine your long term resilience. Maybe it will help you get through a week or a month or a year, but it will wear you down to feel so angry and so miserable inside and will make you less resilient over time, including through hormonal and neurological pathways and mechanisms. That's why happiness broadly, true happiness, underlying sense of meaning and value and purpose in your own life, that fosters resilience. And much research has shown that.
All right. You've helped us solve an argument.
Love is one of the main things that make people resilient. When I think about what mothers, as a generalization, have to deal with, there's no way they could deal with the stresses of motherhood without love. And love, their love helps them be resilient. It doesn't justify the mistreatment of mothers to say, oh, you're so loving, we can mistreat you and it's okay. No, but it just points to the power of love broadly to make us stronger and tougher. Isn't that
I want,
interesting?
that's beautiful. And it brings
The
me back,
softest emotion makes us tougher.
it's a stronger. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It brings me back to one of our original points. We talked about safety.
yeah.
And I just want to just kind of dive deeper into safety. Really understanding what role does safety play in the shortening of that window between discomfort
Mm,
and regaining our equilibrium.
that's deeply insightful. You're really insightful and intelligent, Nicole. It's great to
That's
talk
because
with you.
I've been devouring your work, so I'm gonna.
Uh, well, for first, I think it's really great that you're highlighting the need for safety. Broadly, all animals, including us, have three major kinds of needs, broadly defined as safety, satisfaction, and connection. And safety, arguably, in some ways, is the primary need because if you're not safe, if you're about to die because some animal is about to eat you, that becomes the number one priority. And in relationships, like I've worked with many couples, if there is not physical safety in a relationship, if there's any possibility of violence, that has to be addressed first. And then we have emotional safety. So you have to establish that. Then, when that's established, then you can get to other issues. So safety is really important. And if we feel that our safety is challenged, that surges forward and hijacks everything else. So it's very important to address. Okay. So, and indicators of a challenge to safety are basically fear, anger, and helplessness. Those are primary, and physical pain is a signal of a threat. Okay. So what do we do? And I think that to cope, it's really helpful when something comes at us. And this is kind of under the heading of make a plan. It's really helpful to fairly quickly establish inside your own mind how big a threat is this. In other words, I've done a lot of things where I've never been traumatized, truly traumatized. I've had many miserable experiences. And in the mountains, in rock climbing, I've been in situations that were life and death. I've been in many situations that were like that. So I want to be kind of clear about my own background. One of the things I've learned, though, is that when people are attacking me, or if I'm in a very dangerous situation or something has gone wrong, very quickly establish, is this a mortal threat or not?
Mm.
And oftentimes it feels like it's a mortal threat, but it's really not a mortal threat. Now, there's certain things that are mortal threats. If your kid is running in front of a bus, that's a mortal danger, right? But most of the time, it's just irritating, or it's just 100 pounds or euros or whatever. It's just that, or it's just this week, right? Or it's just this relationship. So right there, that's very helpful to establish, wait a second here, I'm going to be uncomfortable. This is a big deal, but I'm going to live. I'm going to live to see the sunrise and fight another day. Like that gives you some distance from the threat. And I think that's a very useful thing to establish, including to establish, I can live through this.
Mm.
I think women as a generalization have much to teach men about endurance, and to know that I'm still going to be here after you jerks have left.
When I think about safety and the impact of it helping us regain our equilibrium,
Yeah.
I think a lot about how we respond to kids when they may be acting out their own suffering.
Mm.
So when our kids are quote unquote, because I don't really like the term, misbehaving, or they're acting out their pain or their frustration or their disappointment in a way that we think isn't acceptable.
Mm.
And we respond in a manner that doesn't create safety. So we
Yeah.
respond by yelling or belittling, or sometimes in a way that we wouldn't respond to another adult because we don't think it's very respectful, but we quite comfortably respond that way to a child. I'd
Yeah.
like to talk about what that does to the child's brain and mind and the entire being from the perspective of trying to help that child get back to equilibrium, and then the patterns and the neuron connections that we kind of ingrain because that's our habitual way of responding. What are we actually doing to our kids in that situation?
Yeah. Well, so I'm a parent with two kids who are adults now, and I've done a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of research about effective approaches to child rearing. So there's so much in what you brought up here I think is really important. Um, First point is to be honest about our own reactions and to be honest about, but very careful about anger.
Mm.
Most of my mistakes as a parent started with my anger.
Same here.
Yeah. And uh, most of my parents' mistakes with me started with their anger. And so anger is natural, but it's a very powerful force, very powerful force. And so I think it's important to be very careful with our anger, including realizing the ways in which, like I've seen your face flash with anger, you've seen my face flash with anger, just as we talk here. For you and me, it's nothing. But if I was like 4 years old and and I was with me then, it would be overwhelming. It's important to really realize that what is seems like on the 0 to 10 scale for the of adult anger for us is like a 2. It lands like an 8 on the being of a vulnerable, dependent child. So that's one comment. Second is obviously the more that we can get support from others, that we can find that village it takes truly to raise a child. Uh, the more we take care of our own well-being as parents, the more able we're going to be calm and cool and collected. All right. It was when I was tired, I was stressed, I was irritated with my wife. That's when I was more likely to be not a great parent. So do what we can outside ourselves. I think that's important. Another is with children, from my theory of parenting, is a big pasture with real fences.
Mm.
In other words, often parents get involved in regulating their children in ways that are just unnecessary. So they're trying to contain the
Yeah.
the horse of the
Yeah.
child in a space that's just too small, especially given the nature of many children. Who some children are very calm and peaceful, and da, 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 da. Others they're like big broncos. Okay, maybe you have one of those. We had one of those ourselves. I won't say which one it was, but anyway. And so they need a big pasture. And when it's real, there's a real fence. And that fence needs to be consistent. Ideally, both parents and others are aligned and consistent in that real fence. And it's a real fence, and there are consequences for running into it or jumping over it. And those consequences, in my view, should not involve corporal punishment. There always are better ways. And I think but that said, there need to be real consequences. So I think asserting parental authority and the principle of parental authority, adult authority, is of course really important as well, in ways that are consistent. I guess the last thing I would just say is that I've worked with children throughout my whole career, from infants all the way through teenagers and young adults. And I think it's really important to take the long view. So many of my, again, mistakes as a parent were because I was too short-sighted. I was so angry about bedtime tonight that I lost sight of the relationship I was going to have with my kid when they were 20 years old. And the real question about school and everything else is, who is this kid going to be when they are, let's say, about 25 years old? Right now they're 5 or 10 or 15. But the real issue is, what are they going to be like when they're about 25 and they're starting to find their own way? Are they going to feel good about themselves? Are they going to be able to have healthy, intimate relationships with other people? Are they going to still be talking to their parents? Are they going to be on good terms with their parents, right? Are they going to acquire useful skills and abilities? Are they going to trust their own judgment? Are they going to have good judgment? Are they going to be a moral person for other people? That's what we really are working toward. And the rest of it is just details. And sometimes we need to lighten up about the grade this kid gets in school, or this particular issue about how we do dinner in our home. We need to lighten up about those things for the sake of these greater prizes down the road.
Beautiful. Before I ask you my last question, tell all of viewers where we can find out more about your work.
Oh, thank you. Um, and have faith in yourself too as a parent. Most children turn out fine. We turned out fine, despite our parents, you know. And I, the last thing I would just say is to really listen to kids and listen beneath the surface. Again, my own errors or failures as a parent often involved not actually deeply listening to my kids, to what they really felt, to what was really bothering them, to what was really happening inside them. You know, it's important to listen and to be a kind of person that a kid feels safe talking with. You know, it's really important. When you have good process, you can have good product, good outcome.
Mm.
But bad process always leads to bad outcomes. Okay. Uh, I would say people could check out my website, rickhanson.net, S-O-N, rickhanson.net. Tons of freely offered resources, talks, videos, PowerPoint slide sets for all kinds of people, including professionals. Tons of material about parenting. And also, very importantly, teamwork as co-parents and intimate friendship and how to nurture yourself as individuals, as parents. Much material there. So I would just say go to my website. I also have a lot of online programs that people can check out. We always have scholarships for people with genuine financial need. Otherwise, they're very affordably priced. They're very well organized. And some of them are very small, bite-sized. Others are deep dives, like a one-year journey of personal well-being. So I would encourage people to go to my website and just check out everything there.
Absolutely beautiful. And I'll put the link in the video so everyone can
Good.
see.
Yeah.
My last question, what does it mean to you to live an empowered life?
Well, empowered, because we live a life. So empowered. Wow, that's beautiful. So what it really means for me is to recognize the precious opportunity of a human life and to claim it, to 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 claim a sense of agency and self-direction in this life, to make the most of it, and to feel that one has the right to do that, that you have the right to do that, and to feel the power in giving yourself over to the healthy currents of the river of your life, to feel the power in giving yourself over to your own goodness, your own lovingness, your own wisdom, giving yourself over to that, and the power in giving yourself over to your abilities, your your qualities and what you care about, so they live through you with tremendous power. It means that as well. Yeah.
That's absolutely. Thank you so much, Rick, for joining us.
And it means empowering other people too,
Mm.
respecting their power, making room for their power, for foregrounding them. To sometimes it means getting yourself out of the way so that you can bring others front and center because it's their turn now.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing with us and for all of your amazing work. And I think for me, for just keeping that passion alive to help us be able to find the path to greater joy and
Mm.
fulfillment in our own lives.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Empowered Kids TV. I'd like you to do us two favors. If this is your first time here, be sure to subscribe and press the bell icon so we can notify you of upcoming episodes and you don't miss any of our amazing programs. And if you found value, please share it. It still takes a village. So share this with your family and friends. As we always say here at Empowered Kids TV, you're just one connection away. With love and gratitude, empower us. Until next time.